Do 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 do. Wait for this thing to say I'm live. What's up, folks? So on a Tuesday, we're at nearly the end of October. We're gonna talk something a touch different than I usually do. But before we dive into that too much, we're gonna let some folks shuffle in. Right, we're starting stream, notifications, all that kind of fun. Let's say one thing only. I'm begging for the Seahawks to find some defense. I know a lot of you aren't big football people, but oh man, like football is basically a religion for me. Just that's a giant joke if that's not obvious, but it's like the one thing that I actively watch on TV. I don't really watch a lot of TV, but football I watch, but only my team. And man, our defense is terrible, but our offense is really good. So let's talk some fun stuff. I want to talk Oddball Fish, and if you guys saw the thumbnail, that's Danger Noodle. That's my Dojo Loach. That's my Oddball Fish, and I kind of want to just go over it, and like none of this is science based, but what I think the appeal of a lot of the oddball fish is to a couple different people, because I think there's like 2 or 3 categories. So number one, right? I think that one of the appeals to the oddball fish is that they tend to be very uncommon. And I think when you get fish keepers who've been in the hobby for a long time, they start looking for that, like, that weird, uncommon thing that they want to know, right? And they want other people to be like, what the heck is that, whenever they look at their tank. So, fish that I think of like this are like typically your ugly brown fish or something like that, right? The fish that you don't see that often. Like some of the ambush puffers, for example, right? They just kind of look like potatoes sitting around. They're kind of weird. There's like the hairy puffer, the dragon puffer, a lot of those guys. I think those are really, really popular in the sense of part of it's their behavior, but also just kind of like they're weird. People don't have them very often. You don't see them very often. I think that's one of the things that has an appeal, which to all the people in chat with the hashtag what's this plant, thank you for those that came in through Chris at Multi-Tank Addiction. Thanks. Hello, folks. Then there's like a second category, and I liken this to people who keep things like pugs and Shar-Peis in the dog world, or like the Sphinx cats in the cat world, which is, I think there's like a level of ugly cute. And what I mean by that is just like something that looks kind of funky, but is oddly appealing to you in a like almost heartwarming way. And sometimes this is like attitude and character of how an animal acts. So like pugs, right? Pugs in the dog world. They're not the biggest lookers when it comes to their face, but they're so entertaining as a character. And they're kind of one of those things where you look at them and you almost feel bad for them. Or like Shar-Peis, where they're just like, or something, Mastiffs sometimes when they're young, where they're just like a big ball of wrinkles and skin. I think this is like some of your axolotls, right? Where like they just look really weird, but are kind of cute in almost, I hate to say this, but like doofy way. I think ropefish are like that too. Where like you look at the face of a ropefish, and like Haley from Oddball Aquatics, right? She's the rainbow. You almost know her for being the ropefish lady, right? It's like Bentley's the rainbow fish guy, Haley's the ropefish gal, Preston John is the puffer fish person. A lot of these people who keep some of the oddball stuff, you're almost identified by what oddball you keep, right? I'm not saying rainbows are oddballs. I'm going to be clear here. But I think it's interesting to see some of those fish where like they just look kind of doofy, and that's the appeal of them, you know? Gulper catfishes, geez, yeah. And yeah, it's one of those things where like you just look at them and you're kind of like, oh, you poor thing, I can't help but love you. You know what I'm saying? That's what I mean by like ugly cute. Then third, I think is the the kind of like category of, how to put this. I it's kind of like the first in the sense that you want something different, but it's the people who aren't as like haven't been in the hobby as long. They want something weird because it's weird. And usually this is behavior based. So like you might be looking at things like the like bichures, right, where there's like these big kind of dinosaurs, or axolotls, another one where like they're just kind of weird fish. They're so different than all your more common fish that you see, your angelfish, your cichlids, your Africans, all the more common stuff that we see in the hobby, right? They're just so out there. Another example of this would be like your eels, right? So if we go to like the saltwater world, you're like your snowflake eels and all that kind of stuff, or like fire eels and stuff in the freshwater world, where they're such different in their behavior that it makes them a little odd because they don't act anything like most of our normal fish. And in some cases, this can be like plecos too. You know, you can have some of those like super hard to find plecos that are kind of oddball, and it's that one where you're like, I saw that fish once last month, made my month. You know, like maybe it's just like they're so reclusive that the appeal is keeping them to see if you can get them comfortable enough to see them frequently, as opposed to them hiding all the time. It's like all these. I think this is like the third category where it's part of its behavior and part of it's not necessarily being like, I've tried so much other stuff that I just want something weird. It's that natural appeal to something that's not normal. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of like how I look at oddball fish. I think there's those three kind of categories. And I think everybody has the category that appeals to them the most. My example. Let's talk about Danger Noodle for a half sec, right? The thumbnail of today. I only have the one. And I feel like I have learned a lot about the character of that loach in a short period of time. Now, my girlfriend loves Danger Noodle. That's her favorite fish. Period. And let me explain you why. Okay? When we do watch TV together, which I normally don't watch a lot of TV, but I have watched some with her, it's kind of our way to spend a little bit of time together. You know, we'll watch something while we have dinner, and that's our spend time together, just some mindless stuff. A thing that we enjoy a lot are Gordon Ramsay shows. So like Hell's Kitchen, MasterChef, that kind of stuff, right? Whenever we put those on, Danger Noodle will swim out from wherever she is in the tank. I don't know how to sex dojo loaches. I don't know. Someone will eventually tell me and I'll figure it out. He will get to the front of the tank and flop down, angled at the TV, and stay there, almost motionless, the entire time that the TV is on. That loach, I joke you not, loves watching Gordon Ramsay. We've had other TV on, doesn't happen. Gordon Ramsay happens. How weird is that, right? And that's part of like, that's the weird behavior thing. And also just like, you know, he's a big big long dojo loach. He's like a yay big now. And he'll flop himself in floating plants like it's a hammock. Plus you've got things where like, you know, dojo loaches, and I've joked about this with the gaseous exchange, but like they have two different air bladders and they'll hold air in them and they'll slowly pass that air and fart. Basically, they fart in your tank. So every once in a while, you will see these bubbles come up from Danger Noodle. And I'm like, he farted in the tank again. And it's just kind of like a dumb 12-year-old joke, right? It's a like that little kid inside that makes you giggle about dumb stuff. And I think that's the appeal to me. Like if I'm going to keep oddballs, it is behavior related. An example would be like, I'm not really into African cichlids that much. I like looking at them. I would not keep them. But I like shellies because their living behavior and that like sand engineering necessity of them is an interesting behavior to me. And so I've kept shellies and I will keep shellies again in the future, right? It's a behavior thing for me. Where I know some other people were like, oh yeah, I keep ropefish because they look so doofy, right? It's just because you love them because they look kind of not all there, right? So that's kind of like my little intro topic. I would love like chat. Other than there's some questions I'll answer. Don't worry. But I'd love to just see what some of you guys like when it comes to oddballs. If you like oddballs, there was a question. I'll kind of address this for a second, just because it's sort of on topic about monster fish. I think there are certain monster fish you would call oddball fish, and there are other monster fish you would not call oddball fish. Example, some of like the big predatory cichlids, your doveye, that level of fish. Those aren't oddballs. They're just giant, so not a lot of people are able to keep them, right? Then you've got your like your stingrays, or if you're in a part of the country where you can keep them, your arowana. These are just things that are like, they're very popular, especially to certain cultures. Like arowanas have a special meaning in like Asian culture, where they don't necessarily have that to like, pasty white guys like me. They just look cool. I think those still don't fall into oddball. They kind of start becoming more chase items because they're very expensive, they're hard to get, or they have a certain meaning, whatever it might be. They tend to be more of a chase thing. But then you can look at some of your bigger fish like arapaima. They're kind of an oddball because most people would look at an arowana over an arapaima. And then you've got to realize, like, an arapaima is eventually going to get 7 foot long. How are you going to keep that thing, right? Or some of the really big eels are kind of getting into that like oddball thing. I wouldn't look at some of the big catfishes oddballs. Like I'm never going to call a red-tailed catfish an oddball. I'm going to call that something that no one should keep in an aquarium. But there are some like bigger fish that you can kind of call oddballs, but not all of them. It's one of those things where I think the oddballs tend to be they're a little special. Like I would call it a half beacon oddball fish, even though they're getting more popular. Or like your mud skippers are definitely an oddball fish because they I think they fall into that like cool behavior, but also kind of in that ugly cute range where like they're just ugly enough that you kind of fall in love with them, and then they have really cool behavior which really makes you fall in love with them. Especially like you can hand feed them. I think that's one of the cool parts, right? So I look at oddballs like that. Chat, feel free to let me know what's your jam when it comes to oddballs. We will talk in chat now. So just a heads up. At Bentley Pasco, if you have a question, we'll go into full Q&A at this point. I kind of have like one other thing I'll talk about for a second. It's kind of a, I guess like a thank you to you folks. So after I put out my extreme video for the krill and nanoflake, apparently a few of you folks like contacted Extreme because they reached out to me. And it not in a like we want to sponsor you way. It was more of a like, hey, thank you for making the video. We had actually quite a few people contact us after your video. We're curious if you'd like to try some of our other stuff. And then I went kind of back and forth in emails with them because I want to make it really clear with them that like, it's not going to be like, I take months when I'm messing with stuff, right? Can you guys hear that squeaky toy in the background that Papa Limo's chewing on? I'm just curious if you guys hear the little squeaks. He's entertaining himself while he's in his crate. But sorry, I'll get back on track. So we went back and forth for a little bit, and they were like, we don't want to do anything to where it's like a sponsorship, but we would love actually for you to test some stuff and just give us your honest opinion. So I agreed to that, and it basically all it was they were going to send me a little package of food of some of the stuff I haven't tried yet, to see what I liked based on some of the fish I kept. We went back and forth about talking about the fish I keep, and so that it's not like, here's the stuff for monster cichlids. Like, I don't keep any of those. Why are you sending me this? In that package, which arrived today, I literally picked it up on the door, like running into the house to get everything online. I don't know how well this is coming up on camera, but handwritten note. 3 pages of handwritten notes, mind you, about what they sent. Some of which is on the market. Some of which is stuff they're testing. So I kind of like became a beta tester for them. And it's some interesting stuff. Like I found out that, one of the higher ups, owners, whatever word you want to use, that's there, used to work in the tech field a long time ago. Like used to do, so we kind of have some bond there where we're talking back and forth, and I kind of explain my background and how I apply things when I'm messing with any given product in the hobby, because I apply my professional background in the sense of methodologies and standards and blah, 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 blah. So they sent me something to play with. I can't talk about it, right? They one of the things they said, I want to actually read this part of the note, because this has nothing to do with what it is, but I liked this particular note. If you don't like it, please, in large capital letters, please say so. We're not committed to this product at this stage. It is still being tested. I like that, right? That's definitely something that plays deep down to me, because like one thing that I really enjoy about their product that I don't think I really covered very well is it's fish food that's been basically proven on a fish farm and then made in a way that can be useful for aquarists like us, right? So kind of cool to me. Anyway, we'll get off that. I'll eventually talk about this stuff probably months from now. They sent me a lot because they realize that I take forever. So I've got a couple months worth of extreme foods to play around with and test before I decide whether or not I like them, and give them appropriate feedback on some of the stuff that they're messing with. And yeah, chat, you're kind of mentioning like, yeah, the nanopads are a little expensive. You know, some of their food's a little expensive, but it is higher quality, so you kind of get that. It's like Northfin or New Life Spectrum. Those higher quality foods will cost you a little bit more money because you're paying for that quality, right? It just happens. It's not like Tetra Min granules, which are on sale on Amazon right now. I put a thing on the community tab. Hopefully they're still on sale. But yeah, it's very cool. But at the same time, yeah, a little more expensive. But I'm kind of willing to do that when I realize like how long or the impact that food's making. Like I've got a video coming out Saturday that some of the new fish that are, they're basically the last new fish that I'm ordering for quite a while that are all here at the house. And there are some very young rainbows that are already coloring up really, really fast, much earlier than they should. And part of that is honestly probably that krill flake. I won't lie. So with that being said, I'm going to get into some questions. There were some very earlier, Michael Griffiths, how I remember me, Massachusetts, it's 9 p.m. Well, now it's like, what, 9:19 p.m., 9:20 p.m.? I recognize your name, but you will have to forgive me if I can't place exactly where from. Like, I reckon it's kind of like in person, I'm really good at remembering people's faces, and I tend to be very bad with names. But in the digital world, like, your screen name basically is your face, right? Unless you're like, some monkey like me who's on camera, where you actually see my face in all its ugly glory. But, so like, I don't always remember perfectly each person until I've interacted with you a lot. And that's just a matter of how my brain clicks. Like, it's really good at recognizing that thing I identify kind of as your face, right? Your face should be in quotation marks. But solidifying that as, like, some kind of inherent reminder in my brain. So, like, there's be some examples of, like, Sean, right? Sean, the Shelly superfan, right? Because we've gone back and forth in emails talking about Shellys for a long time. Or it was like basically guaranteed that he would ask me some question about Shellys every stream just to make me talk about Shellys. Little stuff like that. Like, that helps me, like, know exactly, like, kind of a key phrase of who you are. And that just happens over time. That's natural, right? But yes, I recognize your name. It's a little late. I know. But I'm on the West Coast, so it's only 6:20 for me. Michael Melier. I really hope I'm pronouncing your last name right. I think that's right, because it looks like it's French-based, but I could be really wrong. Optimum flow for a 75-gallon angelfish and Corydora setup. Low tech with mostly crypts and java ferns and a fluval 3.0. I mean, most of those fish actually can do really well in surprising amounts of flow. Like, angelfish and Corydoras live in the Amazon. There's a lot of flow in the Amazon. I think if you have something like even an FX4 like type canister filter, they actually, like, their flow is gentle, even though it pushes a lot of water around. It doesn't push at really fine points, so the flow that it produces in the tank is pretty gentle, which works well, but it does turn over a lot of water. You could do things like an AquaClear 110 on a 75 pretty easily, or a pair of AquaClear 70s. I would probably do 110s personally. I think that would be fine amounts of flow. If you do two, I would, like, dial them back just a little bit, like 75% of their power. If you're using, like, the Tidal, same thing, right? They have really good flow, so just dial it down a little bit. Don't go too crazy, but they're gonna do fine. You can watch your fish and tell. Like, Corydoras love flow. They come from pretty fast-flowing streams in most cases and rivers, so they're not going to care that much. The angelfish might, but you can do things where you can make areas of your tank that aren't directly in the flow and are basically rest spots, and you can do that using hardscape and all sorts of stuff, that if your fish want to be out of the flow, they can go retreat to those areas and rest for a while, and then move back into the flow whenever they want to. So keep that in mind too, right? You can let them have spots in the tank that have flow and don't have flow. Like a lot of river tanks, when people do river setups, generally it's advised to have a safe area for them to rest when they need to that is out of the flow. It's blocked in some way, shape, or form, usually by hardscape, like rock or something that gives them a sheltered area to let them rest a little bit. But hopefully that helps, Michael. For Real Fish Keeping. Danger Noodle is an awesome name. I spit my drink out when you said that. So, that name comes from my lady. And at first, there was a far less polite name. But I had originally said, like, I think it was like, when we first got the fish, which he or she, I'm not sure, came over from a guy who had his tank crack, and I basically adopted all of his fish. And in that was Danger Noodle. And I kind of, like, I was always like, oh, and then there's that, do you see that big fleshy noodle looking thing? That's the Dojo Loach. And her immediate response was, going to that, like, 12 and 13-year-old well and referring to male appendage. And so from there, it was kind of like the nickname Danger Noodle kind of came around between us kind of talking back and forth, laughing and being, 13-year-olds. And that just kind of stuck because it's like a funny name to us. And I love it. What do? You just got to get into it. Okay, so there was... Okay, I don't remember who asked this, but there's somebody who asked if I am, like, either one, if I don't like puffers or if I just don't know much about them. I like puffers, but I like very certain puffers. And the certain puffers I want all require very large tanks, with the exception of the Shotodenai puffer. And in that case, it's basically that all my tanks were full before I had an opportunity to get them. So they've just kind of taken a back seat. I have kind of a standing offer from Preston John to get puffers from him as long as I breed them. What I would really like, as far as a puffer is concerned, if I was to get like whatever puffer I wanted or whatever chase fish I wanted that was not a rainbow fish, I would want the Cross River puffer. And for those that are not super familiar, basically take a Shotodenai puffer in that spot pattern, make those spots red, and then make it about 2/3 the size of a full-grown Mabu puffer. They get pretty big. They're going to get like, I think it's 18 inches to 24 inches at max adult size. Very big fish. Lots of waste. And basically it just comes down to, I don't have the right setup that could keep that fish long term. So I'm not going to be buying it ahead of time, knowing that long term I can't keep that fish properly. And going like, well, what do I just do when it gets to that point? I would rather know that I could keep that fish long term than not. Alexander Lee, can't believe you're wearing that hat after that embarrassing loss. Is it really that embarrassing? I mean, our defense sucks, but Kyler Murray has two really, really good weapons and a pretty decent running back. And Kyler Murray's a great player. I don't think it's that embarrassing. I just think it shows that, like, the Seattle Seahawks need slightly more than just Russell Wilson to win. Justin E. Carcinotetroodon. That's a tough word. Irabesco. And as a dwarf puffer. So that's the red spot puffer, the red eye puffer. They have kind of like a grayish blue tone to their body, like one red spot in the middle of the body, and then the red eyes. Isn't that right? And they're a small dwarf puffer. They're little like micro hate machines, but they're pretty cool looking. If I'm remembering that right, I've seen them in person. They're very cool looking, but not my jam when it comes to those. Knight Rider, great TV show. The original one, not the new one, was not very good. Belly Pasco, our annual killifish oddball, why or why not? I mean, I guess if you think they're an oddball. I don't think killifish are oddball fish. I think, like, killifish keepers, because, like, killifish are super colorful, right? And they're super interesting. Most oddball fish tend to be kind of bland in appearance, but there's interesting parts to them, whether they're kind of that like ugly cute or whatever. And some people will say that they are an oddball, and that's fine because they're not a super popular fish. But I think the people who are into killifish are so into killifish that they'll keep killifish over anything else. And oddball fish keepers don't tend to be like that. Like, you'll get like the oddball tank, and it's a mishmash of all sorts of weird fish all together that can live together. Where like killifish keepers are just going to keep lots of killifish, right? And that'll be that guy who like has a closet full of shoeboxes full of fish. You know what I'm saying? Like shoebox sized containers full of fish. And I don't know. To me, they're not an oddball fish. I think that annual killifish, especially, they're a kind of fish that takes a lot of dedication, because you have to constantly be dealing with the cycle of the fact that they live such a short period. You got eggs and all that kind of stuff you need to mess with. But if you get that down, they could be really rewarding, because you're constantly raising up baby fish and getting these fish to adults and spawning. You're playing the cycle over and over again, and it can be very rewarding for some people. Nirvana Aquatics, Bentley beta tester. Well, I mean, I work as a tester for a living, and I've beta tested and alpha tested a lot of video games in my time, so why not do that with some fish stuff? That just sounds like fun to me. But maybe that's because I'm a complete weirdo. I'll make sure I've skipped some stuff. Jeff Chambers, NLS is okay. I don't know if it's significantly better than others, though. I mean, if you ask the people at NLS, they'll say that it's the best food ever made, period. Uh, but yeah, a lot of places will probably say that because they're very confident in their products, or it's their marketing, one of the two. Believe what you want. Like I said, I've said this in a couple videos now. Like, if my fish eat that food a lot, that's what I care about. As long as I look at it and I know that it's like relatively good nutrition for my fish, and my fish eat it like crazy, that's all I care about. All I care about. Jeff Chambers, dragon puffers are for everyone. Dragon puffers are not for me, man. I do not dig as far as like wanting to keep the ambush puffers, but that's because if I'm gonna have a fish that doesn't do a whole lot, it's gonna be a Pleco. Because I get like neat, cool patterns and colors out of them. East Coast, North Carolina for four-wheel fish keeper. Be curious what part of North Carolina. I have some friends out in North Carolina and South Carolina. I might actually, you know what I would love? This is like a total random thing, but I would love to see something like fish convention-wise in that general region, like your Tennessee, Carolina area. And I know you're going to be like, that's a whole bunch of area, but just in that kind of portion of the East Coast as opposed to like New York, New Jersey, or Florida. And the only reason why I say not Florida is just because I hate Florida's weather, but I don't do hot weather well, or very humid weather. That's me. I'm just bad in that kind of weather. Russell Dale. I finally got the turquoise rainbows that I wanted. I have two small ones, and they're bullying my Pracox. Are turquoise bullies typically, and how many can I keep in my 40? So, I mean, if it's just the turquoises in a 40, turquoises will eventually get kind of big. So, I would say don't go more than like 8. And I would realistically look at like just a group of 6 because they're going to get big, especially the boys. So rainbow fish will inherently set down a kind of like alpha male to subdominant male culture where those alpha males are going to be the ones that are always sparring, always courting, and always kind of defending their spawning territory to try and get females. They're not really gonna. They typically don't hurt the other fish. It's just they chase them out of their territory. Their territory should be in big quotation marks. This happens with my Blaharii all the time. Like I'll have 3 or 4 males that all like have a spot in the 75 long that they just hold down, and it's their turf, and they're chasing everybody off. But they'll do that for like 30 minutes, and then they stop, and then everybody gets along together. It's just the way rainbow fish are. I wouldn't worry about it too much. The Pracoxes are going to be fine. But especially if you're going to separate those turquoise eventually, they'll be okay. EJ Fishes 76. Do you find any of your fish that don't care for the nano pellets? Some of my community tetras go after it. Others don't care for it. Everybody loves the krill, though. In general, my fish that I fed really went after it pretty quick. Now, to be fair, rainbow fish will eat kind of anything, and most of my tanks are rainbow fish. I think the only thing that did not attack it right away, oddly enough, were some of the guppies. But part of that is because the adults could get to it, and it sunk fast enough that it would then start getting into the baby territory, and it was too big for the babies, is what it really came to, the smaller babies. Like some of the like mid-sized juveniles would go after it. So it's kind of unfair to say, like, they didn't touch it. It was more like they knew it was too big for them. And they left it alone, knowing that like some other food was going to come because I give that tank all the food it ever wants because I'm a sucker for those fish. But for the most part, other than I know even my SAEs went hog wild for it, so I couldn't say anything. But you got to keep in mind like 90% of my fish are rainbow fish, and they'll eat anything. So it's a little unfair. Once it's hit the water and that smell gets to them, which is the big thing, they go for it. And that's one of those things that, like, the smell matters a lot for rainbow fish. So I've had, Saravipan is a great example. I've put Saravipan in with rainbow fish and they haven't touched it. even though it's like supposed to be a nice high quality food, no preservatives or artificial anything, I've had rainbow fish ignore it entirely. And that says a lot to me when a rainbow fish ignores food, because rainbow fish are kind of notorious for having the bottomless stomach. They'll always beg for food, even when they've had plenty, and you need to be careful about that because you could get them bloated or constipated. They would ignore it. And then another tank of rainbow fish would eat it like crazy, right? So I think part of it is just like some fish might be more shy and ignore it, or others, it's just like that smell just isn't their jam, but that krill is just right for them, right? So it's kind of one of those. In my case, everything's eating it like crazy, but that just happens to be, it smells probably close enough to the krill flake, and they love that krill flake that they'll go nuts for the pellets too. Michael, quit spamming, man. I already answered. From S, just the simplest name ever. Russell is a god. Kyler Murray is his second coming. I'm not going to go that far, but they're both very, very good football players. Anthony Ruth, lungfish are oddball. Yes, they are. You know what's really cool about lungfish? The way they eat. And I think this is part of that, like, it's so weird and gross that it becomes interesting. Because Jeff Chambers is just like, lungfish are gross. They have this, like, almost mucus. And I think it actually probably technically is a mucus. So they'll break down their food with this mucus, and they'll keep, like, spitting it out and bringing it back and spitting it out and bringing it back until they shape it just right to fit their mouth. And I've watched Master Breeder Dean's lungfish do this, Lumpy, and it is disgusting in a very fascinating way, is the only way I can think to describe it. It's like, it's so weird and so different than most of the other fish that I keep that it's like fascinating to watch this process, as it's just like slowly forming his food and breaking it down to where it's like, no, it's in my happy place and I can eat it completely. Like, so strange. Epic Aquariums. Yes, this is a Fluval Flex 15 behind me. I both like it and hate it. I have a kind of one of the earlier flexes. So if you were to, it's hard to see, but like the silicone that holds the divider in the back here, I've had to re-silicone it twice and it just never holds. It eventually breaks. So it's like actually kind of bent at a curve right now. And there's, if you can almost barely see it. There's like a trail of water coming through that crack right there. And I mean, it's granted, it's just a plastic divider and it's not affecting the glass of the tank at all, but it's annoying. But I actually, in general, like the tank. I think it's a good, like, the very low end of medium light that is provided. So it's good for crypts. It's good for like a really simple, low-tech setup. You can keep some simple fish in there. The pump will give you a lot of flow, but it clogs up kind of easy. So you can let it kind of clog up, and then it lowers the flow and becomes more relaxed. And there's tons of stuff you can put in there. I would not put shrimp in that tank personally, but that's because the way the overflows are designed. But yeah, it is a Flex 15. I both like it and hate it. Would I buy another one? No. Am I happy with the one I have? Yes, other than that stupid divider. Oh, man. It every time I look at it, I'm sitting there going like, oh. Okay, had a big jump of chat. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Anthony Ruth. All fish are beautiful to me. Good on you. Good on you. Pike. Okay, so from Blake. What about pike live bearer? I saw it with my local fish shop, not stop. Jeez, English. I would argue that they're like, in the live bearer world, they're an oddball. They're kind of a cool fish though. Like, you don't see them very often, which is kind of what starts to make them into that like uncommon fish, almost oddball territory. And they're a live bearer, right? So they breed in a way that's really simple, but They're not like a guppy or a platy or a molly. So it kind of plays this like combo of games where it's like it's a category of fish that's super popular, live bearers, but it's a really uncommon live bearer, and just a little weird compared to most the common live bearers. So it kind of plays that game of oddball but not oddball. You know what I mean? It's not super outside of the realm of like a normal fish, but yeah, a little weird. Casval, is there a big rule of thumb for getting plants to overtake algae in a tank that's 50% plants, 50% algae? If I do anything, the algae wins. I've been stuck in limbo for years. Okay, so usually when you're having serious algae issues, and it depends on the type of algae, it's one of like three things is in a big out of whack state. So either A, we're going way too crazy on our nutrients, or way too little on our nutrients. So the plants aren't able to fully utilize everything at their disposal. And then algae can take advantage of one thing. Algae is a single-celled organism, right? So algae doesn't need a lot. It's very simple. It's not as complex as plants in order to all of a sudden burst out and be successful, right? 2, overabundance of light. Because if we're in a low-tech setup especially, the plants only use so much of it photosynthesizing. And if we have just a huge abundance of light, that algae can start taking over. And sometimes this is most commonly seen in like your super low demand plants. Like when you start getting that black dust on a Nubius, that's because you have way too much light. They really need to be shaded because that's what they are kind of naturally out there. They're in shadier areas. 3, we're way overfeeding our fish. There's too much phosphates, and phosphates are one of the biggest things that push algae growth in a tank. So usually when we're having big algae issues, we kind of tear down in 3 ways. Almost always, I first look at feeding. So I will take whatever I'm feeding normally. Let's say I feed once a day. I will start feeding every other day. And I'll do this for a couple of weeks. Don't worry, your fish are going to be fine. Don't feed more because you're only feeding every other day. Feed the same amount you would normally, but just you're basically cutting your food in half. But you're doing it by feeding every other day instead. If, after removing all your algae, right, and you change your feeding schedule, algae's still growing at the same rate, that tells us we're not overfeeding the fish. It's light or nutrients. Second, light. Now I'm going to dial back my light. I'm either going to take down the time that the light stays on or the intensity the light sits at. Sometimes both, but very rarely do you need to do both. Usually it's if your light is on for 12 hours a day, put it on for 6 hours a day. Cut that light in half. Do the same process. Remove as much algae as you can by hand, get it out of the tank, and then cut your light effectively in half, whether it's time or intensity. Time is usually the preference. And monitor for a couple weeks. Are we seeing a difference in the rate that algae grows? That's our answer. If that algae is no longer growing as effectively, we found our problem. Our problem's light. Now, if algae is still growing plenty fine, now our last option is nutrients. Then we have to look at how much fertilizer are we putting in our tank. If the answer is we're putting no fertilizer in our tank, we're probably not giving our plants what they need to kind of crest over that hill and overtake the algae. Or, potentially, we're dumping way too much in there because we're thinking like, well, I've got a lot of light, so I should put a lot more nutrients in, right? But if they don't have the carbon necessary, so usually CO2 is how we do that, to chew through all those nutrients, then it's going to leave lots of excess nutrients in the water, and the algae is going to take over and consume all those nutrients because algae doesn't need CO2 to go hog wild on you. Plants do. They don't necessarily have to have injected CO2. You just have to have carbon sources in the water. And sometimes that's naturally just through the process of water changes and the turnover that's at the top of your water, all that ripple that's helping oxygenate on top of your air stone, all that stuff. So we kind of have three angles of attack, and usually number one is food, number two becomes light, and then very rarely is it nutrients, but that's can be the hardest to diagnose is our nutrients. So we can put ourselves in a thing where we'll fight algae for months, and sometimes depending on the algae, like when I'm fighting Blackbeard algae off, which the last time I did it was I don't know, like a year and a half ago now, when I dealt with a Blackbeard issue in a tank, it took me like 5 months to deal with it. Because when Blackbeard breaks out and starts going crazy on you, and like sometimes I'll get a little bit here and there in a tank, like I'll get a little bit on a filter output or a little bit on an intake to a filter, but I won't see it all over the tank. In the case of this, it was like the Guppy Mansion, all the Java fern was just like covered in Blackbeard. There was Blackbeard down on the substrate, and it was just kept growing and kept growing and kept growing. And I'd made some other adjustments, and I couldn't really like fix the problem within a couple weeks. It took months, and I had to address it in a very slow and methodical way, but I addressed it. So sometimes we can make a change, and we'll watch it for 2 weeks and be like, man, nothing changed, and we'll give up and we'll try something else. When sometimes you need to go at it for a month, 2 months, 3 months. And that's the hard part. Depending on your algae, some of those algae breaks are really, really, really hard to tackle quickly. You have to do it at a slow, methodical pace and be patient. And that sucks, right? Because we don't like looking at algae. It's easy to get frustrated. It's easy to say to yourself, well, that's not the answer. I must be doing it wrong. I keep doing this wrong. Sometimes the answer is we're too impatient to solve the problem, and we're not giving the steps necessary to solve the problem enough time to actually kind of like tackle that hill and get ourselves to where the plants take over and naturally fight off the algae. It's tough. It's real tough. I won't lie. It's real tough. But it can be done. Mike Stambaugh, what's up, man? My Ancestress Cheese Creek Plecos are one of my ugly oddballs. I am not a fan of the Cheese Creek Ancestress, specifically because they're so ugly to me. And they're not that, like, ugly appealing. There are things that are ugly appealing to me. The Cheese Creek aren't. But there are a lot of people who love that Pleco, and they are pretty desired. So I can dig it still. I respect people that keep them and love them. I just look at different Plecos personally. That's just me. Like zebra Plecos. I love those dang things. And I'll eventually have them again. S. The shortest, easiest name. Should you consider short body and other breed out traits as oddball? I would not, personally. I look at them as genetic defects and things that certain markets breed on purpose that we should try to avoid where possible. But everybody has their opinion. I'm more of a naturalist. I don't even know that that's right, but I appreciate things that exist relatively naturally in nature and kind of like keeping them that way, with the exception of my guppies, because I love those things to death and they don't exist in nature. But like rainbow fish. There's so many colors of rainbow fish that exist out there. They're all beautiful. We don't need balloon rainbow fish. And there are some out there. And when I see them, it makes me sick to my stomach. It really does. Like I've seen balloon bosemani rainbow fish, and it just makes me go, why? Why would you do this? You have such a beautiful fish naturally. If you don't like the body shape, why would you make it weirder, shorter, and fatter? Like, they already have, like, for some people, a weird body shape. Why would you make it even weirder? That doesn't help. Like, what are you doing? But there are some people who are really into that look. So you do what you do. Chad Wyndham is like, what? Just joined. Saw some shout outs to Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm there too. So cool. Yeah, you got a couple of people in the Carolina area. That's kind of dope. I have some former coworkers who are friends that are in Charlotte. And then I have some friends that are in Columbia, South Carolina. So I actually I took a vacation out to Columbia for a little over a week several years ago. Nice area. Actually, I kind of digged it out there. There's a particular like restaurant chain that's exclusive to like the South that doesn't exist out here in Washington called Zaxby's that I really appreciated while I was out there. But it's just a, you know, what do you do? Everybody's got their regional thing that they love to death, and that was just the one thing that I liked. Bentley, what's the max number of rainbows that are between 4 and 5 inch mark that you could fit in a 75 gallon? The answer to that is how much water changing do you want to do? Do you want to change 50% water every single day? Then 30. They won't have a lot of swim space, but you could do it. Realistically, I would say a safe bet is like 10 to 15 bows, but you can keep a lot more than that. I mean, Gary Lang will keep like 40 big rainbow fish in a 75 gallon, but he does a lot of water changes. He has a lot of filtration, and he's got a lot of plants, right? So he's attacking that from multiple angles to make sure that they have good water quality and are healthy. I personally I like numbers, but I would like to see giving them ample swim space too. So it all depends on some personal taste. Like, if you're trying to have lots of taller stem plants, so there's not a lot of swim space except the very front of the tank, I would dial the number of rainbows that you're going to keep back. I would go like 12 to 15 tops. Then you're going to have only crypts so that the top area of your tank is open and there's lots of swim space up there and it's only down low. Then you can start looking at potentially going like 20 fish, 25 fish, but you're probably going to need to water change a lot more. So it's all about the level of maintenance that you want to take care of and the planting and all that kind of stuff. It's a combination of several factors, and it's all up to you. The big thing comes down to how much maintenance are you going to do? If you're like looking to do a 50% water change every 3 days, you can keep a lot of fish in that tank. You really can. But are you going to be basically religious about doing that every 3 days? That's the question. The real question is you. What level of schedule are you going to have with yourself? And that can tell you whether you can kind of overpopulate or whether you want to go a little lighter on your population. Maybe you only want like 12 rainbows in that thing. So they got lots of swim space and you see like cool behavior, all that kind of stuff, right? Maybe you want to see like more schooling behavior. So you want a bigger number. Well, then you make some alterations. You have a little bit more filtration. You have a good amount of plants, and you work on a good water change schedule so that you can fit more fish in there and see that cooler behavior and keep them nice and healthy. Stuff like that, man. Chad Wyndham. Lungfish both disgust and scare me. Come on, Chad. They're not that bad. They are gross when they eat, though. But there's something fascinating to watching how grossly they eat. I don't know how to put it other than that. Oh, man. Oh, geez. Hi, chat. Thanks for jumping. All right. I might miss a few things, but I'm going to skip because I see a few at Belly House goes, DC Kyle. So you're going to pick up a bunch of oddball glowfish or glow betta in the near future. Okay, so I'm going to put this out there. I saw some glow bettas. I took my lady to a massage appointment because she gets them every once in a while. As a part of, she has like a combination of chiropractic and massage therapy that helps her. And so like she'll do that, and I'll usually go to, there's a Petco near there where I'll go like pick up some puppy treats or maybe a puppy toy for the dogs. And I walked past the betta section because I always do this anytime I go to a Petco or a PetSmart, and I don't go to them very often. But when I do, I go past their betta section because I'm always curious like what they're keeping and if they look like they're keeping them relatively well, because each location is a little different, right? I saw glow bettas. I felt really sad because bettas, they're already line bred to so many different like fin shapes and colors, and they're already so pretty. Do we really need to make them neon and glow in the dark? Really? Do we really need to? Like, you guys are gonna that interview I did with the shrimp keeper that's coming up. If you haven't seen the community tab, go vote on that poll. So far, completely unedited. The full conversation is like absolutely dominating that thing, which it's about an hour long. So be ready for that. But he started breeding bettas and selling them for a profit at like the age of 12. This guy This guy's done a lot of breeding fish and now exclusively shrimp. So when I talk to people like that, where like they can tell me all this cool stuff and like new trends in bettas and found all these things and how they moved around the world and stuff like this as they went through their life, and then I look at like a glow betta, and it makes me feel like we're so interested in sales that we're losing what to me is the most beautiful part of this hobby, which is that being able to appreciate, as my friend Jason Redfish Bluefish puts, that those living jewels of life that exist out there in some way, shape, or form naturally, right? Like natural bettas, the betta splendens in the wild, you don't get quite as much crazy stuff as we get in our line bred bettas that we have now and our fancy bettas, but you still get beautiful color out of them. Blues and reds and all these things that some of our wild bettas have, like the Mahachiensis or like the betta rubra, the macrostoma, of course, like probably the king of all like rare bettas. They have so much beauty in them, and they're all a little different. They're all so interesting and cool. Do we really need to make them neon green or neon pink and glow in the dark? Do we really need to? No, we don't need to. We're losing sight. And I know part of it is like kids are really into it. My kid brother, right? So my brother is 11 years younger than me. And I remember one time after I shortly had my big fish tank up with all the rainbows, and I had adopted 2 little glowfish from a guy who's like, I'm moving today. Can somebody please come take my fish? And I saw it on Craigslist, and I was like, yeah, I'll come adopt your fish from you. And it's some white clouds and these 2 glowfish. And they had more glowfish in the first place, and it was like a little, like 10-gallon tank with the neon-colored rock gravel, because it was for his little daughter, right? And little kids are interested in it. And I brought him home, and like the first thing my brother notices in the tank is like, hey, what's that fish there? The bright pink one. That thing's kind of cool. Because he's not really into fish. He's kind of gotten into them a little more now that I've kept them, but it appeals to certain people, right? But to me, I wonder why we lose sight of the natural beauty in the world. We start doing stuff like that, and I don't think we need to. But that's me. I can rant about glowfish for an eternity, and that's just, I'm a crotchety man. That's really what it comes down to. Oh, man. JT Zamora and E. Littles kind of has a similar question, but hold on. Do you think guppies actually eat hair algae? I've heard mollies do, but can't get a good answer. So, I have seen platies and mollies eat hair algae. I have never seen guppies do it. But, to be fair, I've kept line-bred guppies. Wild guppies might do so. But mollies definitely will eat algae. Platies will also eat hair algae. I have seen Mickey Mouse platies aggressively eat hair algae in a tank. It's kind of cool. You can basically not feed them, and they'll take algae out. It's kind of great. Now, E. Littles, asking about guppies again. A little different, though. If not for your mother's history with blue glass, which, for those who don't know, my mom, the whole time I was a kid, and still to this day, collects Depression-era blue glass. It's that cobalt blue glass, right? Part of the reason why I love the Blue Hawaiian Moscow guppies is they remind me of my mother's glass collection, and that's why I keep them. Do you think that you would currently keep guppies? Yes, I would keep different guppies. I don't think I would like keep lots of guppies. I think I would probably still only keep like one, but I'd be more likely to keep an Endler species, probably, because I like Endlers quite a lot. But I love that blue color. There is one other guppy species I want, and I will eventually find them and get them. But for right now, I'm happy with just the ones I have. Gore Sim. Come up to Asheville, North Carolina. Maybe at some point. I can't make any promises. DC Kyle. So there are a few people I mentioned Zaxby's. They're all you Carolinians. Zaxby salads are the best. Yes, actually, that is what I had while I was there. I think we went to my friend who I was hanging out with the entire time I was there I think we went to Zaxby's twice, and both times, like first time I got a salad, and then I got the exact same salad the next time because it was so good. For like, you know, a fast food place, it was very, very good. What can I say? I haven't had anything quite as good out in the Northwest, but you know, there's other things that are way better out here too. So you do what you do. Different categories of food though. Oh my God, I found Nemo. I like balloon mollies and platies, but all of the balloon fish, I feel like they look very unnatural. So if you, do you mean like the teacup platies? Because they're technically a balloon species, but they're not like super balloon. I'd be curious about that. Because I think the teacup platy is at about the fine line of where like a balloon gene I'm kind of okay with because it's not excessive. I've seen like the really excessive balloon ones where they just make me kind of throw up a little in my mouth. But yeah. There's Zaxby's in Utah? Crazy. See, things I learn. Kelly Foreman, any good resources on growing macroalgae? I'm thinking of pulling the trigger on Cyanodorsalis as a tank. Can I use just lights, ferrous, and CO2? There's actually lots of really good resources about macroalgae out there. Me personally, I'm not well studied on it. However, I had a friend who had a tank that was only macroalgae, so it was scaped to look like how you would do a jungle val tank, right? And it was super cool, but he had no fish in it. And I never understood. He's like, oh yeah, this is my macroalgae tank. Doesn't it look cool? And it's like all these like kind of ferny and grassy looking plants. I was like, yeah. What is this stuff? And I was like, what are these plants? He's like, oh no, this is macroalgae. Right? Because at first I looked at it, I was like, oh dude, what weird plant is that over there? Give me a clipping of it so I can go grow it in my house. He's like, oh no, that's macroalgae. That's a saltwater tank. And it blew my mind because like I'm not a big saltwater person, right? So I don't have a lot of experience with macroalgae. And I looked at it and was just like, all right, that's really cool. What fish do you have in there? He's like, oh yeah, I don't have any fish in there. I just got some cleaner shrimp. And I was like, why don't you have any fish in there? let them swim around in the algae. It looks cool. But yeah, there's plenty of resources out there, and I'm sure you can even find like YouTube channels that are dedicated to teaching that kind of stuff. But there's a lot on how to do well with that. And I imagine because it's not coral, it doesn't take a whole lot to be successful. Oh my God, I found Nemo. Yes, I meant the teacups. The females are nice and chubby when they're pregnant. The bright red color makes them look a lot like a balloon. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like they're not the teacups are not excessively ballooned out. They just kind of look chubby. Anyway, we're getting kind of toward the end here, folks. I know Dr. Black is planning on going on here soon. I think, Dr. Black, tell me if that's correct or not. Phrasing. Thanks, Rico Stan. But we'll go here quite soon. For those who are interested, want to check out a sweet Aussie, go check out Dr. Black's channel. He'll be streaming right after this. For those that, if I missed a question or something like that, and you really want to get an answer, all right, 17 minutes. We got a few minutes. You can reach me on my email. I'll put that in chat. Although I'm sure if I can beat Candy, if only because I got the delay. That's bentley.pasco@gmail.com. If I missed your question, feel free to email me. We got a couple minutes. I'll do a couple last questions if they float in really fast. But just in general, I want to thank you folks. Yeah, I'm sure I missed some. The chat jumps on me because I take forever answering things. But just very recently, having things like Extreme kind of reach out to me because of you folks. And just in general, like I really appreciate. We've had lots of really cool streams, and you guys have been like super wonderful in the comment section. It's just been absolutely a blast. You've made a lot of the parts of dealing with the mental aspects of human malware kind of a treat and a joy. So thank you to you folks. I really want to put that out there. I sincerely mean it, because it can be tough when you can't do a lot of the stuff you want to do. But, I get an opportunity to interact with you wonderful folks once a week, and kind of just makes my week every time I get to do it. With that being said, just some stuff that's coming up other than like I've got some extreme stuff I got to mess with. But this Saturday, there's going to be a video on some new, like basically the last new fish that are coming into my house for a very long time. And then after that, there's a big interview with the shrimp breeder. I think you guys are really going to appreciate that. And this Saturday, I'm going out to Redfish Bluefish's shop where I'll be delivering some blue Hawaiian Moscow guppies. So those will eventually go for sale on his site once that's up and running. He's got fish that have to go through quarantine and all that kind of stuff. But we'll film while we're there. We'll show off some stuff. There'll be a video for that. So be looking forward to that. And yeah, just a couple of cool things to enjoy and do. I have to say this. Nirvana Aquatics. I've been stuck in isolation with no fish or tanks. It has not been pleasant. I live vicariously through Bentley and the co-op. Well, thanks, man. I'm glad I can help a little bit. Also, like a little shout out for since we've got a few minutes here before Dr. Black goes on. Although technically, I'm sure that I need to go like have dinner with my lady or something. Baron Tropicals, who just showed up in chat. Secretly, what a lot of you guys don't know is that Baron is actually kind of the reason I got into YouTube. Short story. This will be the end of the night, right? So originally when I did YouTube, I did some small gaming videos as guides to help people out in a game that I played with a small group of people that are on effectively a blog site that I followed and wrote for a while. Nothing paid, just did it for fun. When I started doing fish stuff, Baron did a couple of giveaways very early on his channel where you had to do video responses. And, you know, he had a small channel, and like I remember you were at like I think maybe 150 subscribers when I first started watching you, Baron. Which, buddy, it's so good to see you back. And I just kind of was like, I'll enter this. I'll shoot a short video. It'll be fun. Maybe I'll get lucky and win. You know, there's only gonna be so many people doing this, right? And then I kind of just liked it enough to where I was like, oh, I'll do a couple other random things. Like one of the other things I did is I tried to shoot my tank as like, here's my community tank for Win Aquarium Co-op used to do like the viewer tanks, right? I did one for that, and then like Fluval had a contest for the bug bites when they first brought it out, and I did my fish eating the bug bites, and actually was one of the winners in that contest, which felt amazing because they sent me a whole ton of bug bites food, and a couple of T-shirts, and like that bug bites food they sent a ton, partially because I kind of like weaseled my way into a ton of it. Which is to say, they sent like, congratulations, you're a winner. You get a supply of fish food. And I kind of asked them, I was like, what defines I think they said year's supply of fish food. I was like, is that based on how many fish tanks I keep, or is that on one, or do you just have a set value? And they're like, well, how many tanks do you have? And at the time, I think I had 15, right? And or something like that. And I told them, they're like, well, we'll see what we can do. And I said, well, if it's just one tank, can it be the tank that I showed in the video? And I gave them the stocking numbers, right? At the time. That's changed over time. And they sent me like, what was it? So the packs that those come in, those boxes, they're it's like 6 of the cans each. And you know, they're a plastic. I call them tins, but I had somebody who's like, that's not a tin, it's a plastic container. Whatever, I call them a tin, deal with it. And they come in like, that's either 6 or 8 tins. They sent 3 of those boxes. That lasted me so long. Which back then, that was great. Because that was while I was unemployed. But anyway, that secretly, Baron is how I got into doing fish YouTube. So it is all because of Baron Tropicals that this fat goofy bastard is doing fish YouTube. Secretly. So, Baron, good to see you back, buddy. I know you've kind of been flirting here and there with shooting videos when you can and popping into streams more. Good to see you, my friend. For the rest of you guys, again, thank you so much for showing up. Candy, the supreme mod of all mods, as always, thank you for being the wonderful person you are. And yes, to answer that, John Ebson, who is son of Leanne. Leanne is the wonderful woman who let me have her guppies. Can't wait to see the guppies come out. And yeah, I did Final Fantasy 14 content for black mages because that's what I played. So yeah, with all that said, thank you so much for watching, folks. Have a fantastic night. As always, stay awesome. And hello to How Do I Tell You?